freezing night. An elderly couple begging for shelter. A single father who couldn't say no. Most people claimed they'd open the door. But 3 days later, everything he owned vanished. Bank account, frozen. Home, taken. His 8-year-old daughter, being watched by strangers in black SUVs. The couple he sheltered, they lied about who they were. And now he's trapped in something that could destroy them both. Or expose a truth powerful people buried. This isn't about good deeds getting rewarded. It's about the brutal cost of compassion and the enemies you make when you refuse to look away. Most people think they do the right thing, but when it threatens your child's safety, when your entire life crumbles because you showed mercy, would you still open the door? Subscribe before you're forced to choose. Where are you watching from? Let's know in the comment. The knock came at 10:47 p.m. Caleb Hartman's hand froze on the deadbolt. Nobody knocked this late. Not in this neighborhood. Not unless something had gone terribly wrong. He'd been about to check on Leora one last time before bed. His daughter, 8 years old, too smart for her own good, had fallen asleep on the couch again, wrapped in the same faded quilt her mother used to curl up with on winter nights. 3 years since the funeral. 3 years of learning to be both parents at once. Caleb had gotten better at it. Braiding hair, packing lunches, reading the same bedtime story for the 100th time without showing how tired he really was. But winter nights? Those still hit different. The heater clicked and groaned like it might quit any second. The walls felt closer after dark. And the silence, God, the silence pressed down on him like something alive. He'd learned to fill it with noise. TV on low. Music. Anything to drown out the emptiness. Tonight, he'd forgotten. The knock came again. Softer this time. Almost apologetic. Caleb glanced back at Leora, still asleep, her small chest rising and falling under the blanket. He cracked the door, just enough to see. Snow dusted the porch. The streetlight flickered at the end of the block, casting long shadows across frozen concrete. And there, standing under the dying light, were two people who didn't belong. An elderly man leaned heavily on a wooden cane, his shoulders hunched like gravity had been pressing down on him for decades. Beside him, a woman clutched his arm with pale, trembling fingers. Her coat looked thin, too thin for December in Ohio. Their breath came out in shallow clouds. The man spoke first. "We're sorry to bother you this late." His voice shook, not from fear, but from something deeper. Exhaustion. Desperation. "We were told someone here might help." Caleb's throat tightened. Every nerve in his body screamed no. He had a daughter inside. He didn't know these people. And strangers knocking after 10? That never ended well. But the woman swayed. Just slightly. Just enough. Caleb's hand moved before his brain caught up. The door opened halfway. The man spoke again, quieter this time. "My name is Edgar Rowan. This is my wife, Maribel. No badges. No IDs in sight." Caleb didn't move from the doorway. "What do you need?" Edgar shifted his weight, wincing. "Our building lost heat 4 days ago. Management said they'd fix it. They didn't. Then the pipes burst. Power went out yesterday." Maribel's lips were pale, almost blue. "Shelters are full," Edgar added. "We tried 3. They turned us away." Caleb's jaw tightened. He wanted to believe them. He really did. But people lied. People took advantage. And he had Leora to think about. "I'm sorry," Caleb started. "I don't. Please." Maribel's voice broke. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just broken. Caleb looked past them, down the empty street. No car. No bags. Nothing but 2 people standing in the cold like they'd run out of options hours ago. He thought about his wife. What she would have done. What she would have said if she saw him right now, hesitating. Inside, Leora stirred. A soft sound, a sleepy murmur. Caleb's heart dropped into his stomach. If he let them in and something went wrong, if these people weren't what they seemed, he'd never forgive himself. But if he closed the door and they froze, he'd never forgive himself for that either. Edgar must have seen it on his face. The calculation, the fear. "You're right to be cautious," Edgar said gently. "If I were you, I'd feel the same way." That didn't help. Caleb glanced back one more time. Leora had rolled over, her small hand clutching the edge of the blanket. She looked so peaceful, so safe. He thought about explaining to her in the morning why he'd turned two people away. How he'd tell her that sometimes you have to protect yourself first, even when it hurts. The cold air bit at his skin. Maribel's knees buckled, just for a second, and Edgar caught her, his cane nearly slipping from his grip. Caleb made his choice. He stepped aside. "Just for tonight," he said, voice tight. "That's it." Maribel's eyes filled with tears so fast it startled him. Edgar nodded once. Slow, grateful. They stepped inside, and Caleb locked the door behind them, knowing, somehow, that nothing would be the same after this. Caleb pointed toward the couch. "Sit. I'll get blankets." Edgar lowered himself slowly, like his bones might shatter if he moved too fast. Maribel stayed close to him, her hands still trembling. Caleb moved through the house on autopilot, grabbed 2 wool blankets from a closet, found an old space heater in the hallway that barely worked but might help. When he returned, Maribel was staring at the framed photo on the wall. His wife, smiling, alive. "She's beautiful," Maribel whispered. Caleb didn't respond, just handed her the blanket. Edgar took his without a word, wrapping it around his shoulders like armor. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You didn't have to do this." Caleb nodded, still didn't sit. He stood near the kitchen, arms crossed, watching them like a guard who couldn't afford to relax. That's when Leora woke up. She blinked once, twice, then saw the strangers on her couch. Caleb moved toward her instinctively, ready to explain, but she didn't scream, didn't hide. She just stared. Then she slid off the couch and walked straight to Maribel. "Are you cold?" Leora asked. Maribel's face crumpled. A little. Leora disappeared into her room. Caleb's chest tightened. He wanted to stop her, to pull her back, but something held him in place. She returned seconds later, holding her favorite scarf. The one her mother had knit. The one she never let anyone touch. Leora placed it around Maribel's neck without hesitation. "This helps," she said simply. Maribel's hand flew to the scarf. Tears spilled over. "Sweetheart, I can't." "It's okay," Leora said. "You need it more." Caleb felt something crack inside him. Edgar watched the whole thing in silence. But his eyes, sharp, calculating, tracked every movement, every gesture, like he was filing it away, remembering. Caleb noticed, and for the first time since opening the door, he wondered if letting them in had been the right choice, or the worst mistake of his life. Caleb sent Leora back to bed an hour later. She went without protest, still sleepy, still trusting. Edgar and Maribel settled on the couch. Quiet, grateful, too quiet. Caleb tried to relax, told himself everything was fine, but his body wouldn't listen. He sat in the kitchen, nursing cold coffee, watching the hallway. The heater hummed. The fridge clicked. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Around midnight, Edgar stood. Caleb's muscles tensed. "Bathroom?" Edgar asked. Caleb pointed down the hall. Edgar nodded and shuffled away, cane tapping softly against the floor. Caleb waited, listened. Then he heard it. A voice. Low, controlled. coming from behind the bathroom door. Caleb moved closer, keeping his footsteps light. "I told you not to involve anyone," Edgar whispered. "No, we'll handle it ourselves." Silence. Then, "I don't care what they said. We're not dragging innocent people into this." Caleb's blood went cold. Dragging people into what? He stepped back before Edgar could catch him listening. Returned to the kitchen. Sat down. Pretended he hadn't heard a thing. When Edgar emerged, his face was calm. Unreadable. "Everything all right?" Caleb asked casually. "Fine," Edgar said. "Just checking in with a friend." Liar. Caleb forced a smile. "Get some rest." Edgar nodded and returned to the couch. But Caleb didn't move. He stayed in the kitchen, staring at nothing, replaying the words in his head. "We're not dragging innocent people into this." Too late for that. He thought about waking them, asking them to leave. But what would he say? That he'd eavesdropped? That he didn't trust them? They were old, tired, harmless, weren't they? Caleb rubbed his eyes. Sleep wasn't coming tonight. Hours crawled by. Finally, the sky outside shifted from black to gray. Morning. Caleb stood, stretching his stiff neck, and walked toward the living room. The blankets were folded neatly on the couch. Edgar and Maribel were gone. No note, no explanation, just an envelope sitting on the kitchen counter. Caleb's hands shook as he picked it up. Inside the envelope, $200 in cash, and a handwritten note. Caleb unfolded it slowly, his pulse hammering in his ears. "Thank you for choosing kindness when it mattered. You may not realize what you've done." That was it. No signature, no explanation, just those two lines. Caleb read them again. Then again. "You may not realize what you've done." What the hell did that mean? He checked the living room, the bathroom, even Leora's room, though he knew they wouldn't be there. Gone. Completely. Like they'd never existed. Except for the folded blankets. The scarf still draped over the armrest. And this envelope that felt heavier than it should. Caleb sat down hard on the couch. Relief washed over him first. They were gone. Leora was safe. He could breathe again. But then the confusion crept in. Why leave money? Why disappear without saying goodbye? And that line, "You may not realize what you've done." What was that supposed to mean? He thought about the phone call. Edgar's whispered words. "We're not dragging innocent people into this." Into what? Caleb stuffed the cash back into the envelope and shoved it into a drawer. He didn't want it. Didn't want any reminder of last night. When Leora woke up an hour later, she asked where the nice people went. "They left early," Caleb said. "Had somewhere to be." She looked disappointed. "I wanted to say goodbye." "I know, kid." She noticed her scarf still on the couch and picked it up, holding it close. "Do you think they're okay?" she asked. Caleb didn't know how to answer that. "Yeah," he lied. "I think so." Leora nodded and went to get ready for school. Caleb stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the counter where the envelope had been. He told himself it was over. That whatever Edgar and Maribel were running from had nothing to do with him. But deep down, he knew better. Because 3 days later, everything started falling apart. It started with the SUV. Black, tinted windows. Parked across the street Tuesday morning. Caleb noticed it when he took the trash out. Still there when he left for work. Gone by the time he got home. He told himself it was nothing. Just someone visiting a neighbor. But Wednesday it was back. Same spot. Same vehicle. This time, Caleb walked toward it. The engine started before he got halfway across the street. It pulled away slowly, deliberately, like whoever was inside wanted him to know they'd been watching. Caleb's stomach twisted. Thursday, the question started. His neighbor, old guy, kept to himself, stopped him on the sidewalk. "Some men came by yesterday," he said, "asking about you." Caleb froze. "What kind of men?" "Suits." Badges, maybe? I didn't get a good look. The neighbor shrugged, said they were conducting interviews. Wanted to know if anything unusual happened lately. What did you tell them? That I mind my business. The neighbor eyed him carefully. Should I be worried? No, Caleb said quickly. Just a misunderstanding. But his hand was shaking when he got back inside. Friday, Leora came home from school quieter than usual. You okay? Caleb asked. She nodded, then hesitated. There was a lady today, she said slowly. She was standing by the fence during recess, just watching. Caleb's chest tightened. What did she look like? I don't know. She had sunglasses, and she didn't smile. Did she say anything to you? No, but she was there the whole time. And when the bell rang, she left. Caleb knelt down, forcing his voice to stay calm. If you see her again, you tell a teacher. Okay, Leora nodded, but he could see the worry in her eyes. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He kept replaying everything in his head. The knock, the couple, the envelope, the SUV, the questions, and now someone watching his daughter. He thought about Edgar's phone call again. We're not dragging innocent people into this. But they had. Whatever this was, whatever Edgar and Maribel were running from, it had followed them here. And now Caleb was caught in it. He just didn't know how deep yet. The landlord showed up Saturday morning. No call, no warning. Just a knock on the door and a manila folder in his hand. We need to talk, he said. Caleb let him in, already knowing this wasn't going to be good. The landlord, a heavy-set guy named Porter who'd never caused problems before, wouldn't meet his eyes. He set the folder on the table and slid it toward Caleb. I'm sorry, Porter said. You've got 30 days. Caleb stared at the eviction notice like it was written in a foreign language. What? His voice came out flat, disbelieving. 30 days to vacate. What? Porter shifted uncomfortably. Property management made the call. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Caleb's hands curled into fists. I paid rent on time. Every month. Never missed once. Never caused problems. So tell me, why am I being kicked out? Porter finally looked at him. It's above me, Caleb. I don't make these decisions. Then who does? Corporate. Legal. I don't know. Porter stood, eager to leave. I'm just a messenger. This is insane. Caleb's voice rose. You can't just throw people out for no reason. There are laws. Then lawyer up, Porter said sharply. But the notice stands. 30 days. He walked out before Caleb could say another word. Caleb stood there, staring at the papers, his mind racing. This wasn't random. This wasn't a coincidence. Leora appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. What's wrong? She asked quietly. Caleb forced a smile he didn't feel. Nothing, kid. Just grown-up stuff. She didn't look convinced. After she went back to her room, Caleb grabbed his phone. He tried calling the property management company. Got transferred 3 times. Left on hold for 20 minutes. Finally, someone picked up. I'm calling about an eviction notice I just received, Caleb said, struggling to keep his voice steady. I need to speak to someone about. We can't discuss active cases over the phone. You'll need to submit a formal appeal in writing. I want to know why. The line went dead. Caleb stared at his phone. Then, because the universe apparently wasn't done punishing him, he opened his banking app. He needed to see how much he had saved, how long he could survive if this got ugly. The screen loaded, and Caleb's heart stopped. His account balance, $0. Status, frozen. Caleb refreshed the app. Still frozen. He logged out, logged back in. Same result. His savings, his checking, everything he'd worked for gone. Not stolen, not withdrawn, just locked away, like someone had reached into his life and flipped a switch. Caleb's breath came faster. He called the bank, navigated the automated menu, waited on hold for 15 minutes. Finally, a representative picked up. "I need to know why my account's been frozen," Caleb said, barely keeping his voice level. Typing sounds on the other end. "Then, I'm seeing a hold placed due to suspicious activity." "What activity? I don't have those details." "You'll need to visit a branch with identification and..." "When can I access my money?" "That depends on the investigation timeline. Could be a few days. Could be longer." Caleb's vision blurred. "I have a daughter. I have bills. I can't wait. I understand your frustration, sir, but this is a security measure. You'll need to." He hung up, sat there, staring at nothing. Evicted. Broke. Watched. All in less than a week. This wasn't random. Someone was doing this to him. And he knew exactly who. Edgar. Whatever that old man had gotten himself into, whatever he'd been running from. It had followed him straight to Caleb's door. And now Caleb was paying for it. He thought about going to the police. But what would he say? That he let strangers stay overnight, and now his life was falling apart? They'd think he was paranoid, delusional, or worse, they'd start asking questions he couldn't answer. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Caleb almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello." Silence. Then a voice. Calm. Professional. "Mr. Hartman? Who is this? My name isn't important. What matters is that Edgar Rowan would like to speak with you." Caleb's blood turned to ice. "How did you?" "There's a diner off Route 35. Mabel's. Be there tomorrow at noon. Come alone. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what the hell is happening. Tomorrow. Noon." The voice softened slightly. "Trust me, Mr. Hartman. You'll want answers." The line went dead. Caleb sat frozen, phone still pressed to his ear. Edgar's name, spoken out loud, by someone who knew exactly where to find him. Caleb arrived 10 minutes early. The diner was the kind of place people stopped at once and never remembered. Peeling paint, flickering neon sign, a parking lot full of trucks and regret. He sat in a booth near the back, facing the door. Ordered coffee he wouldn't drink. Waited. At 12:03, the door opened. Edgar walked in first, but he looked different. Straighter. Steadier. No cane. Maribel followed, wearing a tailored coat that hadn't come from a thrift store. They slid into the booth across from him without a word. Caleb stared. "You're not limping," he said flatly. Edgar met his eyes. "No, and you don't look like you spent 4 days without heat." "We didn't." Caleb's jaw tightened. "So you lied." "Yes." The honesty hit harder than an excuse would have. Caleb's hands curled into fists under the table. "Who are you?" Edgar leaned back. "Exactly who I said. Edgar Rowan, retired logistics consultant. Married 42 years. No children. Except you're not helpless." "No." "And you weren't freezing. Not that night." Caleb's voice dropped. "Then why knock on my door?" Edgar didn't flinch. "Because we needed somewhere safe. And we needed to see what kind of person you were. You tested me." "Yes." Rage boiled up in Caleb's chest. "My bank account is frozen. I'm being evicted. My daughter's being watched by strangers. And you're telling me this was a test?" Maribel spoke for the first time, her voice quiet. "We didn't know it would go this far." "Didn't know?" Caleb leaned forward. "What did you think would happen?" Edgar's expression hardened. "We thought we had more time." "For what?" Edgar pulled a folder from his coat and slid it across the table. Caleb didn't touch it. Inside, Edgar said calmly, "are documents, property records, corporate filings, names you've never heard of but should recognize. I don't care about. You're in danger, Mr. Hartman." Edgar's voice cut through the noise. "Not because of what you did, because of what we did. And now they think you're part of it." Caleb's stomach dropped. Part of what? Edgar opened the folder himself. Inside were photos, contracts, legal documents stamped with government seals. For 30 years, Edgar said quietly, I ran a logistics company. Last year, I uncovered something I wasn't supposed to. He looked up, and the people responsible will do anything to keep it buried. Caleb stared at the papers, then at Edgar. What does this have to do with me? Edgar's expression didn't change. Everything. Because you opened the door. Edgar spread the documents across the table like evidence at a trial. My company handled government contracts, he began. Transportation, infrastructure, routine work. Caleb stared at the papers but didn't interrupt. 2 years ago, I noticed discrepancies. Money disappearing. Invoices that didn't match shipments. Small things at first. Edgar tapped one document. A spreadsheet with highlighted rows. Then I found the pattern. Millions being funneled through shell corporations. Contract awarded to companies that didn't exist. All tied back to one development project. What project? Housing renovations, Maribel said quietly. Low-income buildings across 3 states. Federal funding. Supposed to modernize heating systems, fix infrastructure. Edgar's jaw tightened. Except the work was never completed. Contractors took the money and disappeared. And the people approving those contracts? They got paid to look the other way. Caleb felt his stomach twist. The heat outages, he said slowly. Edgar nodded. Not accidents. Those buildings were left deliberately broken. Pipes burst because they were never fixed. Power failures because the wiring was never replaced. How many people? Thousands. Edgar's voice went flat. Families. Elderly residents. People with nowhere else to go. Caleb's hand shook. And you have proof. Every transaction. Every name. Every signature. Then take it to the police. The FBI. Someone. We tried. Maribel's voice cracked. We went to 3 different agencies. Filed reports. Submitted everything. And Edgar leaned forward. 2 weeks later, our apartment lost heat. Our bank accounts were frozen. We were evicted. And people started following us. Caleb's chest tightened. They wanted us silent. Edgar continued. So they took everything. Made us look crazy. Desperate. And you came to me. We needed a witness. Someone clean. Someone they couldn't easily discredit. Caleb's blood ran cold. You made me part of this. We made you a target, Edgar corrected. And I'm sorry for that. But now they think you know something. And they won't stop until they're sure you don't. Caleb's throat went dry. What do they want? Your silence. And if I stay quiet? Edgar's expression didn't change. Maybe they leave you alone. Maybe they let you rebuild your life. Or they make an example of you anyway, just to be safe. Caleb stared at the documents, at the names, the numbers, the proof. Silence meant survival. Maybe. Or it meant letting guilty people walk free while innocent families suffered. He thought of Leora and hated the choice in front of him. Caleb pushed the folder back across the table. I can't help you. Edgar didn't move. I understand. No, you don't. Caleb's voice shook. I have a daughter. She's 8 years old. She's already lost her mother. I'm all she has left. Maribel's eyes filled. We know. You don't know. Caleb cut her off. You tested me. You brought danger to my door. And now you're asking me to risk her life for people I've never met. We're asking you to do what's right, Edgar said quietly. Right? Caleb laughed bitterly. What's right is keeping my kids safe. What's right is making sure she grows up with a father. And what happens when she asks why you stayed silent? The question hit like a punch. Caleb glared at him. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Maribel said softly. But those families, they have children too. And they're suffering right now because powerful people decided their lives don't matter. Caleb closed his eyes. He saw Leora's face, her trust, her belief that the world could be good if you tried hard enough. He thought about the scarf she'd given away without hesitation, about how she'd looked at Maribel and seen someone who needed help. Not danger, just need. If I do this, Caleb said slowly, they'll come after me harder. Yes, Edgar admitted. They'll destroy whatever's left of my life. Probably. And Leora will protect her, Maribel interrupted. However we can. I swear it. Caleb opened his eyes, looked at the two people who'd lied to him, used him, put his daughter in danger, and somehow still believed he'd help. He thought about his wife, what she would have done, what she would have told him to do. He already knew the answer. One condition, Caleb said, his voice hard. You keep her safe, no matter what happens to me. You make sure she's okay. Edgar extended his hand across the table. You have my word. Caleb shook it and signed away any chance of a quiet life. The surveillance got worse. Within 24 hours, Caleb noticed cameras. Not hidden, not subtle, mounted on the telephone pole across the street, aimed directly at his front door. When he confronted his landlord, Porter shrugged. Security upgrade. Property management decision. That camera's pointed at my house. It's pointed at the whole block. Liar. Thursday morning, Caleb walked Leora to school like always. A man in a gray jacket stood near the crosswalk, watching, not hiding, not pretending, just watching. Caleb held Leora's hand tighter. Who's that? She whispered. Nobody, but she wasn't stupid. That afternoon, she came home pale. He was there again, she said, at pickup, standing by the fence. Caleb knelt down. Did he say anything? She shook her head, but he was looking at me. The whole time, Caleb's hands curled into fists. That night, he called Edgar. They're not even trying to hide it, Caleb said, pacing. They want me to know they're watching. It's intimidation, Edgar replied. They're testing you, seeing if you'll break. And if I do, then they win. Caleb hung up. He checked every lock, every window, made sure Leora's door was closed, made sure she felt safe even though he didn't. Around midnight, he finally let himself relax, closed his eyes on the couch. Just for a second, he woke to cold air on his face. His eyes snapped open. The front door was ajar. Not broken, not forced, just open. Caleb's heart slammed against his ribs. He grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and moved toward the door, every nerve screaming. He checked the lock. Still engaged. Someone had a key, or they'd picked it. Either way, they'd been inside. Caleb swept through the house, bat raised, checking every room. Empty. Nothing stolen. Nothing disturbed. Except, he stopped in the hallway. On the wall, written in chalk, a single word. Stop. Caleb's stomach dropped. He scrubbed it off with shaking hands, checking over his shoulder every few seconds. Then he went to Leora's room. She was still asleep, peaceful, unaware. He stood there, watching her breathe, his mind racing. They'd been inside his home, while his daughter slept, while he slept, and they'd left a message. Not a threat, a warning. Caleb closed her door softly, returned to the living room, stared at the front door he'd triple-checked before bed, and realized something that made his blood run cold. They could get to her any time they wanted, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. Caleb didn't sleep the rest of the night. He sat in the living room, bat across his lap, watching the door. Every creak, every shadow, every car that passed outside sent his pulse racing. By morning, exhaustion had sunk into his bones. but fear kept him sharp. He called Edgar at 6 a.m. "They were inside my house," Caleb said, voice raw. While we were sleeping, silence on the other end. And what did they take? Nothing. Just left a message. One word. "Stop." Edgar exhaled slowly. "They're escalating." "No kidding." Caleb's voice cracked. "I can't do this anymore. I can't put her at risk." "Caleb, I'm done. Find someone else." He almost hung up. Almost. But Edgar's voice cut through. "If you stop now, they'll still come after you. Because you already know too much." Caleb's throat tightened. "You said staying quiet might keep us safe." I said maybe, but that was before they broke into your home. The words landed like stones. Caleb stared at the wall where the chalk had been. Scrubbed clean, but still burned into his memory. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying the only way forward is through. We go public. We expose everything. Make it too risky for them to touch you. Or they kill me before we get the chance." "That's a possibility." Caleb laughed bitterly. "You're terrible at pep talks." "I'm being honest." Edgar's voice softened. "But if we do nothing, they win. And people keep suffering." Caleb closed his eyes. He thought about Leora, about the scarf, about how she'd looked at strangers and seen people worth helping. He thought about his wife, about the kind of man she believed he was. And he thought about that word on the wall. Stop. They wanted him afraid, wanted him silent, wanted him to give up. "When do we move?" Caleb asked quietly. "Tomorrow. I've already reached out to a journalist, someone we can trust. And after that, everything changes." Caleb opened his eyes, stared at the front door. It already has. The story broke on a Wednesday. The headline hit every major outlet by noon. "Millions in fraud. Federal housing scandal exposed." Caleb watched it unfold from Edgar's motel room, laptop open, news playing on mute. The journalist, a woman named Renata Cross, had done her job perfectly. She'd verified every document, contacted every source, built a case so airtight that denial became impossible. Within 2 hours, the first arrest happened. A city official, caught on camera being escorted out of his office in handcuffs. By evening, 3 more followed. Executives, contractors, people whose names Caleb had only seen on paper. Now their faces were everywhere. Edgar sat across from him, watching in silence. Maribel paced near the window. "It's working," she whispered. Caleb didn't respond. He kept refreshing the news, kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. His stomach twisted, but he answered anyway. "Mr. Hartman." A different voice this time. Older. Calmer. "You've made a very serious mistake." Caleb's hand tightened around the phone. "Who is this?" "Someone who tried to offer you a way out. You chose poorly. If you're trying to scare me, it's too late. The story's out. Everyone knows." "Oh, we're aware." The voice remained unervingly calm. "And we're very interested in having a conversation with you. In person. Not happening. Then we'll have one with your daughter instead." Caleb's blood turned to ice. "You touch her. Relax, Mr. Hartman. We're not animals. But you should know, going public doesn't protect you. It just makes you more valuable." The line went dead. Caleb sat frozen, phone still pressed to his ear. Edgar leaned forward. "What did they say?" "They threatened Leora." Maribel stopped pacing. "We need to move her. Now." "Where?" Caleb's voice shook. "They found us before. They'll find us again." Edgar stood. "I have a contact. Someone who can keep her safe while this plays out. I'm not sending her away. You don't have a choice." Edgar's tone left no room for argument. Not anymore. Caleb wanted to scream, to throw something, to rewind time and never open that door. But he couldn't, because the story was out. The arrests had started, and now the people responsible were scrambling. Desperate. Dangerous. He thought it would be over once the truth came out. But he was wrong. This was just the beginning. His phone rang again. Different number. Caleb answered, bracing for another threat. Instead, a familiar voice spoke. Mr. Hartman, this is Renata Cross. We need to meet. There's something you need to see. What is it? Her voice dropped. Evidence that Edgar Rowan isn't telling you everything. Stories like this don't warn you first. Subscribe so you're not blindsided. Caleb met Renata at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the police station. She slid a folder across the table without greeting. Open it. Inside were financial records, transfer documents, legal paperwork stamped with dates from 3 days ago. Caleb scanned them, confusion mounting. Then he saw his name. What is this? Edgar Rowan transferred his entire company to you, Renata said flatly. Shares, assets, everything. It's worth approximately $4 million. The air left Caleb's lungs. That's impossible. It's documented, notarized, legal. She tapped the papers. He signed it over the day after the story broke. Caleb's head spun. Why would he? That's what I'm asking you. I don't know. His voice came out strangled. I had no idea. Renata studied him carefully. Some people are saying this was planned, that you and Edgar orchestrated the whole thing, staged the kindness, played the victim, cashed out when the timing was right. Caleb's stomach turned. That's insane. Is it? She leaned forward. You let strangers into your home. Days later, your life falls apart in very public, very documented ways. Then a major scandal breaks. You're positioned as the hero, and suddenly you're a millionaire. I didn't ask for any of this. Then why did he give it to you? Caleb had no answer. That night, he confronted Edgar. They met at the same motel. Same room. Edgar sat calmly, like he'd been expecting this. Why? Caleb demanded. Why give me everything? Edgar's expression didn't change. Because you deserve it. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Edgar stood slowly. 30 years I built that company. 30 years of work, and it was built on corruption I didn't see, or didn't want to. His voice cracked. When I finally opened my eyes, I realized I'd spent my entire life enabling people who hurt others. And I needed to make it right. By dumping it on me, by giving it to someone who would use it the right way. Edgar met his eyes. You opened your door to strangers when you had every reason not to. You risked everything for people you didn't know. That's not something you fake. Caleb shook his head. People think I staged this. Let them think it. Easy for you to say. Edgar's jaw tightened. I'm dying, Caleb. The words hung in the air. 6 months. Maybe less. And I needed to know that what I built, flawed as it was, would go to someone who'd do better. Caleb stared at him, speechless. The backlash hit within hours. The internet tore him apart. Comment sections exploded. Reddit threads dissected every detail. Twitter, now X, became a battlefield. He played the victim card and got rich. Classic manipulation. This whole thing was staged. Nobody's that lucky. So we're supposed to believe he just happened to help the right people? Come on. Others defended him. Maybe he's just a good person who got rewarded for once. Y'all are so cynical. Not everything's a conspiracy. But the hate drowned out the support. News outlets picked up the controversy. Op-eds questioned his motives. One headline read, "The $4 million good deed. Savior or scammer?" Caleb stopped reading after the first week. Stopped checking his phone. Stopped caring what strangers thought. Edgar had been right about one thing. Going public hadn't protected him. It had made him a target of a different kind. His face was everywhere now. Recognizable, dissected, judged by people who'd never met him, never walked in his shoes, never faced the choice he'd been forced to make. Friends he hadn't spoken to in years reached out, some genuinely concerned, others fishing for details, for money, for favors. He ignored them all. One afternoon, a reporter ambushed him outside his temporary apartment. "Mr. Hartman, do you have a response to allegations that you exploited vulnerable people for financial gain?" Caleb kept walking. "Did you know Edgar Rowan was planning to transfer his assets before you let him into your home?" Caleb stopped, turned, looked the reporter dead in the eye. "I did what I thought was right. That's all I've got to say." He walked away. The clip went viral. Half the internet called him dignified. The other half called him evasive. Caleb didn't watch it. That night, Leora sat across from him at the small kitchen table. She'd been quiet for days, processing everything in that way kids do when the world stops making sense. Finally, she spoke. "Dad." "Yeah, kid." "Did you know this would happen?" Caleb's chest tightened. "No." She looked down at her hands. "Do you wish you didn't help them?" And Caleb realized he didn't have an answer she'd understand, or one he believed himself. 6 months later, the noise finally died down. The arrest stuck. Trials began. The housing developments were rebuilt, properly this time, with actual oversight. Edgar passed away in March. Quiet, peaceful. Maribel sent Caleb a handwritten letter. No explanations, no apologies. Just gratitude. He kept it in a drawer he rarely opened. The money sat in an account Caleb barely touched. He paid off debts, bought a modest house on the edge of town where nobody recognized him, set up a college fund for Leora that would have made her mother proud. The rest? He gave it away. Scholarships for kids whose families couldn't afford heat in winter. Housing grants for people facing eviction. Medical bills paid anonymously for strangers he'd never meet. No press releases. No photo ops. No plaques with his name. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted to sleep at night. Leora adjusted better than he expected. New school. New friends. New routines. She stopped asking about the news. Stopped wondering if people were watching. But sometimes, late at night, she'd crawl into bed beside him like she used to when she was smaller. "You okay?" he'd ask. "Yeah," she'd whisper. Just checking. He never asked what she meant. He already knew. One afternoon, a woman stopped him at the grocery store. "You're that guy," she said. "The one who helped those people." Caleb tensed, waiting for judgment. Instead, she smiled. "My sister lives in one of those buildings they fixed." She said the heat actually works now. First time in 3 years. She touched his arm. "Thank you." Then she walked away. Caleb stood there, staring at nothing, feeling something crack inside him. Not pain, relief. That night, the first snow fell. Caleb watched it through the kitchen window, mug of coffee warming his hands. Leora sat at the table doing homework, humming to herself. The house was warm, safe, quiet in a way that didn't hurt anymore. And then, a knock. Soft, hesitant. Caleb's hand froze halfway to the door. He glanced back at Leora. She looked up, eyes wide. "It's okay," he said, though his heart hammered in his chest. He opened the door. A young woman stood on the porch, shivering, a toddler bundled in her arms. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't know where else to go." Caleb didn't hesitate this time. He stepped aside. "Come in." The woman's name was Petra. The toddler, barely 2, was named Kai. Their car had broken down 2 miles back. Phone dead. Temperature dropping fast. Caleb gave them blankets. Soup. A safe place to rest. Leora watched from the hallway, clutching her scarf. The same one she'd given Maribel. The same one Maribel had left behind when she disappeared. Leora walked forward slowly and wrapped it around Petra's shoulders. "This helps," she said simply. Petra's eyes filled with tears. Caleb felt his throat tighten. Later, after Petra and Kai had fallen asleep on the couch, Leora climbed into bed beside him. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Leora whispered. "I think so. Will bad things happen again?" Caleb thought about Edgar, about the surveillance, about the threats and the fear and the months of chaos. He thought about the woman at the grocery store, about the buildings with working heat, about the people who had a chance now because someone refused to stay silent. "Maybe," he said honestly, "but that doesn't mean we stop helping." Leora was quiet for a long time. Then, Mom would have opened the door too, wouldn't she? Caleb's chest ached. "Yeah, kid, she would have." Leora nodded against his shoulder. "Then we did the right thing." Caleb wasn't sure he believed that, but he wanted to. Somewhere across town, a man named Vincent stood outside a duplex. Cold wind bit at his face. He'd been standing there for 10 minutes, debating. Inside, his daughter waited. His life waited. In his hand, an envelope. Evidence of something he wasn't supposed to see. Something dangerous. Something that could ruin him if he moved forward, or ruin others if he didn't. He thought about the stories he'd read, about a man named Caleb Hartman who'd opened his door, who'd paid the price, who'd survived. Vincent looked at the house in front of him. Someone he trusted, someone who might help. He raised his hand and knocked. The cycle continues, because kindness always costs something. The question is whether you're willing to pay. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted. The cold loosened its grip, and life moved forward the way it always does, one unremarkable day at a time. Caleb and Leora fell into new rhythms. School pickups, homework at the kitchen table, weekend trips to the library where she'd disappear into the fiction section for hours. She was growing up, taller, braver, more sure of herself. But some nights, she still asked questions that didn't have easy answers. One evening, while they sat on the porch watching fireflies drift through the yard, she turned to him. "Dad." "Yeah." "Do you ever regret it?" Caleb didn't have to ask what she meant. He thought about the fear, the surveillance, the frozen bank account and the eviction notice and the word written in chalk on his wall. He thought about the accusations, the strangers who believed he'd manipulated vulnerable people for profit, the months of sleepless nights wondering if he'd destroyed their lives for nothing. Sometimes he admitted. Leora nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer. "But then I think about the people living in those buildings," Caleb continued. "The ones who have heat now, who aren't freezing, who aren't being abandoned by people who were supposed to protect them." He looked at her. "And I think about you, about what you'd think of me if I'd turned them away." Leora was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that broke him in the best way. "I think Mom's proud of you." Caleb's throat tightened. He couldn't speak. Leora leaned against his shoulder. "You taught me something," she said softly, "that doing the right thing isn't supposed to feel safe. It's supposed to feel scary, because if it didn't cost you anything, it wouldn't mean anything." Caleb blinked hard. "Where'd you learn that?" She smiled faintly. "From you." They sat in silence, watching the fireflies dance. And Caleb realized something he hadn't before. He hadn't just survived the knock on his door. He'd passed something forward. A lesson, a value, a belief that the world could be better if people chose to make it so. Even when it hurt, even when it cost them everything. Leora would carry that with her. Long after he was gone, long after this story faded into memory, she'd remember the night strangers knocked, and she'd know what her father chose. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Caleb heard the question that had haunted him since the beginning. Was it worth it? He still didn't know. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point was that he'd tried. And now the question comes to you. Picture this. It's late. You're exhausted. The kind of tired that seeps into your bones after a long day of work, bills, responsibilities, and trying to hold everything together. You're about to lock up, about to collapse into bed, and then you hear it. A knock. Not loud, not demanding, just there. You crack the door open, and standing in front of you is someone who needs help. Maybe it's an elderly couple with nowhere to go. Maybe it's a young mother with a child in her arms. Maybe it's someone fleeing danger you can't see, but can feel in the way their voice shakes. They're cold. They're desperate. They're asking you, a stranger, for kindness when the rest of the world has turned them away. You have every reason to say no. You don't know them. You have people depending on you. You have a life that could fall apart if you make the wrong choice. And let's be honest, most of the time, saying no is the safer option. Closing the door protects you, keeps your world small and manageable. Nobody could blame you for that. But here's the thing. Caleb Hartman could have closed the door. He had a daughter to protect, a life that was already hard enough without inviting strangers into it. He had every logical reason to walk away, but he didn't, and it cost him his safety, his stability, his peace of mind. For months, he lived in fear, watched his life crumble, became a target for people who wanted him silent. He lost everything he'd worked for, and he still doesn't know if it was worth it. But here's what he does know. People are alive today because someone refused to look away. Families have heat in winter because someone chose to act when it would have been easier to stay quiet. And his daughter learned that compassion isn't something you show when it's convenient. It's something you show when it costs you. So the question isn't whether Caleb made the right choice. The question is, what would you do if that knock came tonight? If someone stood on your doorstep asking for help you weren't sure you could give, would you open the door? Or would you close it and tell yourself it's not your problem? There's no right answer, because life doesn't work that way. Every choice has consequences. Every act of kindness has a price. And sometimes doing the right thing means losing everything. But maybe, just maybe, it also means becoming the kind of person who can look their child in the eye and say, I tried. Caleb Hartman opened his door, and it changed his life. Not in the way he expected, not in the way he wanted, but in the way that mattered. So here's the real question. If it were your door, your life, your choice, what would you do? If you wouldn't turn away, subscribe. If you would, comment why.
Hey there. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. We really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And guess what? The story doesn't end here. Click on the video right here on your screen to dive into another fascinating story. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Once again, thanks for being a part of this amazing community. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring stories that move you.